That is not true.
Not true.
If I were to call someone a misrepresenter of that information, my words would be taken down.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Like
guess
you've done
that gives them
before.
liberty to say anything.
Yep.
Because it's in the form of emotion.
Yep. You tell them, Nancy.
But let's make sure that we all take responsibility for doing the right thing.
Well, 18
by
months.
Not letting there
It's
be
about
an
time you
abuse
did
of
the
power,
right thing.
Abuse of this floor of the House.
Brian, Terry, and Jamie's
Abuse of the
Pertos family
time
need to know
of
an
the
answer,
executive
dummy.
branch. An abuse of a member of the time of a member of the cabinet who has serious responsibilities.
You really make me sick,
our
lady.
country.
I can't believe you're saying that.
So I urge my colleagues to do what they want as far as walking off. I myself had
Walking
said that I
off.
was coming to this floor
Like a
to
2-year-old
vote
kid, you gonna
against
take your
this
toys and go home?
resolution. I thought it was so wrong.
You
There
are.
was no question.
You are wrong.
To take the opportunity to vote no.
It's about 18
But
months,
listening
lady.
to the debate,
And murder.
almost unbelievable.
No.
Not that
What's
what
unbelievable is
they're saying
18 months and nobody's
but
come forward and said who, what, when,
that they
where.
would say it.
Lord,
But,
she
you know,
makes me
I
sick.
Say to those who have a doubt about how they want to proceed, that instead of doing what I said before, which was just to come and to treat this as an act of a bill before the Congress, a resolution before the Congress, and express my no. Listening to the unconscionable presentation, I want to join my 2BC colleagues in boycotting the vote
Naturally,
when
you're a
we have
Democrat,
the
aren't you?
walkout after we have the debate over Mr. Dingell's. We all take our
Going over to his house?
responsibilities seriously here, and one of them, first and foremost, is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
Well, you haven't done that since you took office, lady.
And that Constitution requires the Congress and the executive branch, I'll end as I began, to avoid unnecessary conflict and seek accommodation to serve both interests, the executive
Yeah,
branch.
they tried for 18 months and got
and
nowhere thanks to
legislative
stonewalling and
We are
executive
not
order
upholding
obam.
that aspect of the Constitution here. So
Yeah.
urge my colleagues to vote no or no vote, but to seriously
I say hold the
reject.
man in contempt.
And let's hope that this will not be repeated. But I'm telling you, it's Eric Holder one day. You don't know who it is the next. It's just
I
a
hope it's
frivolous,
you. I hope it is
They
you.
a serious responsibility of the House of Representatives.
Come November, you gotta go,
It's
lady.
appalling. I yield back the balance of my time.
You don't have any.
That lady yields back her time.
Listen to him
Gentleman
clap.
from California.
As I know, the former Speaker of the House knows, the Attorney General is being held in contempt as the custodian of the records for refusing to deliver them, and not because we got to choose how far up or not up to go. With that, I would recognize the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chaffetz, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader Pelosi seriously questioned our motivations here. Let me be crystal clear what my motivation is.
There
We
we
have
go.
a dead United States agent.
Thank
we
you.
have more than 200 dead people in Mexico.
Thank you.
We have more than 2,000 weapons that were knowingly, willfully given to the drug cartels.
Thank you.
More than 1,000 of those weapons are still missing. Most of them
Thank
are
you.
AK-47s.
Yep.
We have a duly issued subpoena that has not been responded to.
Yep.
On February 4th, 2011, on Department of Justice letterhead, they presented the United States Congress a letter that was a lie. It took them nearly 9 to 10 months to provide that information and say, whoops, sorry. That's not good enough.
Nope.
This is not about Eric Holder. This is about the Department of Justice and justice in the United States of America.
Amen.
And I would hearken back to the June 3rd, 2011 letter that 31 Democrats, brave Democrats, sent to the White House. I read part of this. Quote, "It is equally troubling." Remember, this is about over a year ago. "It is equally troubling that the Department of Justice has delayed action and withheld information from congressional inquiries." End quote. He went on to say, quote, "While the Department of Justice can and should continue its investigation, those activities should not curtail the ability of Congress to fulfill its oversight duty. We urge
Absolutely.
you to instruct the Department of Justice to promptly provide complete answers to all congressional inquiries on this issue."
An additional 15 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 15 seconds.
Nothing's changed in over a year. But I can tell you this, the Brian Terry doesn't have answers, You don't have answers. I don't have answers. I want all the facts. That's what we're asking for today. The facts. All of them. I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired.
Amen.
Remind the gentleman that
Make a
this,
damn good president
all
right
of this
there.
gun walking started under President Bush.
Oh, did it?
And
Yeah, he let 300 go. You let 2,000 go with no
Gentleman
tracking
from
device.
Reserves his time. Gentleman from California.
I recognize myself for 10 seconds.
Yep.
The distinguished gentleman from Maryland can have an opinion, but he can't have his facts. Fast and Furious was an OSA operation that began under President Obama and Attorney General
Okay.
Holder. No ifs, no ands, no buts, and I would trust that the gentleman would no longer make statements that would be less than truthful. And I reserve.
He called you a
Gentleman
damn liar,
reserves his
Elijah.
time.
15 seconds. Again,
It was
gentleman
recognized 15 seconds.
puts out statements in search of facts. Thank you. I reserve.
Yeah, you need to research your damn
With that, I
facts.
recognize the former
Wasn't even
chairman
the
of
same
the
name
Oversight
in the
Committee,
bush.
the distinguished gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Burton, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from Indiana is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, gentleman, for yielding. There's been a lot of hyperbole and a lot of repetition, but a lot of the things that have been said haven't really been factual. So let's look at the facts. Brian Terry was murdered. Hundreds of people have been murdered in Mexico with guns that went across the border. The Justice Department said in February of 2011 they had no knowledge about this, and then 10 months later, they admitted they lied.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they said they didn't know, and then they said they said they did.
Yep.
Now, I don't know what you call that, but to me, it's a lie.
Yep.
Then Chairman Issa tried again and again to get information so we could get to the bottom of this, like the 32 Democrats wanted, and they refused. He sent subpoenas. They refused. They hid behind this being an ongoing investigation, and they couldn't give those documents. We got a fraction of the documents that should have been given to us, but they wouldn't do that. ISA met with the Attorney General's people to try to come to some conclusion, some kind of a resolution of this, so we wouldn't have to move the contempt citation. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then finally, at the 11th hour, when we knew that we were going to have to move with the contempt citation, the President of the United States issues an executive order claiming executive privilege. Something is
No.
funny.
Yield the gentleman an additional 30 seconds.
Gentleman is recognized for 30
Something
seconds.
is wrong. There's just no question. Something is being hidden from the Congress and the American people. And no matter how much is being said here tonight, the fact of the matter is we aren't getting the information. A Border Patrol agent's been killed, maybe two. Hundreds of people have been killed in Mexico with American guns that our government knew was going across that border, and the Attorney General has not been giving us the information. The Justice Department has been hiding it from the Congress and the American people, and the President has claimed executive privilege. If that doesn't tell you something, nothing will. I yield back.
Absolutely.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves his time. The gentleman from
Mr.
California.
Speaker, I'd inquire on how much time is remaining.
The gentleman from California has 6½ minutes remaining. And the gentleman from Maryland has 1¼ minutes remaining.
Whoa, he's done.
Thank you. I'd ask unanimous consent at this time to place into the record letters dated May 24th, 2012, May 30th, 2012, and June 1st, 2012, all addressed to Elijah Cummings, ranking member of the committee.
Without objection, they'll appear in the record.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now would yield to the gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Langford, 1 minute.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a truly sad day. This is not stunning, as I've heard. This is a deliberative process that we tried to work through. We have a border agent that's been killed. We have hundreds of Mexicans that have been killed. And the fingerprints on all that go straight back to an operation that was done by the federal government. This is a moment to get all the facts, to get it on the table, find out what happened, and to get it done. Now, we started with a subpoena process over 22 different categories. We narrowed that down to one. How do we get the documents from the time of February the 4th of last year, when the Department of Justice told us one thing, and December when they said oops and changed their story? We found out they had not told us the truth, and in that time period when they stalled, we just want the information on that. How did this occur? This is essential because Phoenix ATF had a plan, fast and furious. It was then approved by the U.S. Attorney in that area and then went up the food chain to Department of Justice where it was signed off. This is not irrelevant. This is essential that we know the process of how this was done. If we're going to fix this problem, we've got to know the facts. Instead, they're being withheld. With that, I yield back.
Time of the gentleman has expired. The gentleman from Maryland.
Continue to reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California.
He wants the last word, don't he? He gonna walk out?
Speaker, point of inquiry, do I have the right to close?
The gentleman from California has the right to close.
And I will reserve my right to close.
Oh,
Gentleman from Maryland.
took it away from him.
Have any more speakers? No, I do not. Speaker, as the Democratic leader said, there's no doubt that the Constitution gives Congress the right and responsibility to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
But the Constitution also requires something else.
What?
It requires Congress and the executive branch to avoid unnecessary conflict and to seek accommodations that serve both of their interests.
Oh, that's
In
an
this
old
case,
lie.
the Attorney General has testified 9 times. He's provided thousands of pages of documents.
Yeah.
He's provided 13 pages of deliberative internal
7,600
documents,
pages
and
of
he's willing to
140,000.
provide
Come
more
on,
to meet
Elijah.
The recent demands of Chairman Issa. But House Republican leaders are not honoring their constitutional obligations. In fact,
Listen
they are
to
running
him.
in the wrong direction as quickly as possible.
You're going to hear
It's
from
fundamentally
Issa, buddy.
wrong to vote in favor of this resolution at this time when the Attorney General has been working with the House in good faith. I believe this action will undermine the standing of the House, will cement the Speaker's legacy, and will be recorded by history as a discredit to this institution.
I don't.
With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields
didn't
back
say
his
nothing.
time. The gentleman from California.
I recognize myself for such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is
There we
recognized for
go.
as much time as he may consume.
This is going to be good.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a lot talked about here about documents that the Attorney General couldn't give us. These documents under seal would be an example of documents that we should not see except in camera. And we've taken great care to ensure that no one outside members of Congress and key staff have ever looked at them. But I've looked at them, and what I know is that these documents, read by any person of ordinary learning, make it very clear that these wiretap applications read and signed by individuals in the Department of Justice in Washington, you read them, you knew they were gun walking. People will tell you differently. I give you my word. You read this, you know they were letting guns go to Mexico. They knew who the buyers were, who the intermediaries were, who the recipients were, and most importantly, where they ended up. And there were reports in here as part of evidence given to judges in order to get wiretaps. There were evidence that they knew that, in fact, weapons had already ended up in Mexico.
My God.
That's before Brian Terry was killed. That's while Fast and Furious could have been stopped. That's while people could have been warned. In fact, that's what at a time in which ATF agents in Mexico City, if they punched in the serial number of a weapon found there, they got an erroneous, an error. They did not get meaningful information because that was being blocked. Not by ATF per se, but by the Department of Justice under the auspices of the U.S. Attorney and his bosses.
Mm.
Now, you're going to hear that this began under President Bush, Attorney General McCasey. I'm going to tell you that's just false. What happened in previous administrations with some of the same local ATF agents was they exercised extremely bad judgment. They did things and pushed on programs that I believe were poorly conceived and poorly manned, and as a result, they lost track of weapons repeatedly. That happened, and it was wrong. The U.S. Attorney at the time even declined prosecutions because of failed techniques. All of these were shut down during the Bush administration. President Bush can take no credit for it, he didn't know it. As far as I know, the Attorney General didn't know. And anyone who saw the record of that should say this was wrong-minded. But during this administration, during the time in which the Attorney General and his key lieutenants, including Lanny Brewer, were in charge, they reopened the prosecutions from a failed program called Wide Receiver, and they opened Fast and Furious. Now, I'm the second child in a family. I have an older brother, and I learned at a very young age, you in fact cannot, when you do something wrong, say, my brother Billy did it. It doesn't work that way. You're responsible for what you do wrong, whether it happened before your watch or not. This happened on the Attorney General's watch. But that's not why we're here today. We're here because when we asked legitimate questions about Brian Terry's murder, about Fast and Furious, we were lied to. We were lied to repeatedly and over a 10-month period. The fact is, that is what we're here for. The American people want to know that if you give false testimony to Congress, and the minority leader talked about why is there such a hurry? Why was there 10 months delay? I was sworn in just a few days before this investigation began, and now we're nearing an election, and we don't want to have this during an election. We want to have resolution for the Terry family. The important thing is we know enough to know that we have people who have told us under penalty of criminal prosecution, they have told Congress and their employees certain documents exist, and we've asked for those documents, and we've been denied them. We can't bring Kenneth Melson back in good faith and say, well, we've got to have him in front of our committee. If, in fact, there's documents he says exist, and they do, and they will not be given to us, we want to have those so we can ask the best questions. You've heard earlier that, in fact, we've denied somehow due process to the minority. My ranking member is very capable and has asked for minority days, in other words, hearings exclusively for him. He chose not to do it. When we were having the local ATF and other individuals in early on, all of whom worked for this government, he didn't even ask for any. It wasn't until we asked to have the Attorney General come in based on these false statements and final retraction that he suddenly wanted a previous Attorney General who happened to say, no, I don't want to come. So on that particular day, we would have had to subpoena him to get him in. I have no objection to having the former Attorney General in. I believe that on his watch and his predecessor's watch and his predecessor's watch, and for a very long time, we have not done a good job of overseeing the actions of field agents when it comes to guns. But again, we're here today for the first time in over 200 years to deal with an Attorney General who has flat refused to give the information related to lies and a cover-up exclusively within his jurisdiction. Lies and a cover-up exclusively in his jurisdiction. That's what we're voting on. I urge vote on the contempt on behalf of the Terry family.
Time the gentleman has expired. All time for debate has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
I have a motion at the clerk's desk.
I bet you do, you old
Motion
bastard.
to refer House Resolution 711. Mr. Dingle of Michigan moves to refer the resolution, House Resolution 711, to the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform with instructions to 1. Hold a bipartisan public hearing with testimony from Kenneth Nelson, the former acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives during Operation Fast and Furious. 2.
Why?
Hold a bipartisan public hearing with testimony from William Hoover, the former acting deputy director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives during
You
Operation
had
Fast
18
and
months to
Furious.
bring that bullshit
3.
up. End of
Hold a
conversation.
bipartisan
Beat you
public hearing
now.
with testimony